In addition, the commission did not meet in 2019 prior to the pandemic, but could have met in 2019 since it had 5 members at that time. It's worth noting that in a previous audit report that we did, I believe it was in 2018, at that time there was some discussion by the board on the recommendation of the commission and the potential of the sunset of the commission. Because at that time they were an ADA coordinator had been hired by the municipality, and the commission at that time was struggling with its role versus the duties and responsibilities that had been picked up by the ADA staff member. The other audit that jumps out is the audit of the Youth Commission. That's sunset audit number 10. And in this one, we provided a history of the commission over since about 2012 to about 2018. And based on our review of meeting minutes, resolutions, and attendance records, we recommend that the commission be allowed to sunset, not be reauthorized. Once again, from January 2020 through May 2021, the commission did not meet. We were provided an agenda for a meeting for the February 27th, 2020 meeting, but we never received any meeting minutes and could not find a meeting announcement. Therefore, we could not confirm that the meetings actually did occur. In addition, during that same time period, the commission did not provide any reports or resolutions to the mayor's office or the assembly and had not nominated a youth representative or an alternative representative to serve on the assembly. Furthermore, in June 2021, we found that the commission was staffed with only 5 of the required 15 members. And we recognize once again that the COVID pandemic may have impacted the commission, but however, we found that other boards and commissions did meet despite the pandemic. And then we provided history going back to about 2012, basically where the youth commissions kind of ebbed and flowed over the last several years. That's our report. I'm open to any questions if you have any.
Great, thank you. Do committee members have any questions? Otherwise, I have a lot. Okay, and if you have questions, please just text me and I'll put you in the queue. But not seeing anyone in the queue right now, I'll go ahead and get started. So first is on the vacancies. I haven't met Ms. Williams, but much like you, I have corresponded with her a few times on a few commissions. So I know that she is actively doing her job, which is great. It's a job that needs to be done. So on vacancies, and I don't know if a member of the administration can speak to this, what is Ms. Williams, what is her plan to fill these vacancies? Is the idea to reach out to different associations, constituency groups to see if we can fill these vacancies? Because I noticed several in the audit reports that there are vacancies on several of our boards and commissions.
I can take that question. Mr. Chair, for the record, Amy DeBoski. So Stephanie has been working diligently, and there's actually 3 members of the staff that are working to fill these, because when we walked in, we realized there are a significant number of vacancies, so much so that some boards, some commissions frankly can't meet because they don't have a quorum. So it has been something she's done. She has been reaching out to different groups. I couldn't tell you which groups, and trying to solicit names. She's reached out to, I think, some different assembly members and just folks saying, hey, if you're interested. They did put a post, or they were going to put a post up on the municipal website and through Twitter and Facebook and all that to try to get encouragement. That'd be something that would actually be super helpful if we could get something together that we could also share with assembly members that you could send out through your networks to get more. We're trying to direct people back to the website to apply through the website. So that would be something we would be very happy to work with the assembly to try to get those messages out, because they are actively, this is, I mean, a 7-day-a-week job almost to try to get some of these filled. And it's just something that Stephanie is really, really actively trying to do.
Great, yeah, thank you. Before I go to you, Ms. LaFrance, yeah, I'd be happy to coordinate with the clerk's office to see if we can get some assembly communications on boards and commissions. I know some individual assembly members sporadically do it, but if we can do something as a group, I think that would be helpful. Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a follow-up question to Ms. Dembowski. I think that's a great idea to use social media and use the assembly as well to get the word out. Has there been much coordination, like with Federation of Community Councils? And I only ask because I was at an FCC meeting last night and the desire for continued communications was expressed in, just in all areas. So I just wanted to.
I would have to check with Portia Erickson, our Director of Community Engagement. I don't know what she's done with the FCC. It's just something I don't know, but it's definitely an avenue we need to utilize. So if it's not being done, we can make sure it's done.
Right. And I do want to mention she and another representative of the mayor's office were there last night, and that was a very nice discussion. And so probably she may already be doing some of this. I don't know, but I wanted to mention it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. And then Ms. Morrison, I realize on the phone, you don't have my cell phone number. So if you want to get in the queue, just audibly let me know. Okay, any other questions before I move on to the next one on my list? Okay, so then next is absences. So I noticed that there are a few, not many, but there are a few in the sunset audit reports that they go over either I think it's the 6 or the 3 limit that's set out in code. And I know that the code language is fairly strong. It's, if you exceed your number of absences, that you shall be removed from the commission. But I think that also means that there has to be someone to enforce that shall provision. So I'm wondering if to the administration, is that something that Ms. Williams is also reviewing and enforcing?
I couldn't tell you on the enforcement part, but I know she's been reviewing code to see who qualifies, what those qualifications are, and making contact with as many chairs of commissions that are active as she can. So I know it's a criteria she looks at. And sometimes it's as much as calling the chair to say, hey, were these actually excused absences or were they not? So I couldn't tell you what the conversations have resulted from those phone calls. I just don't know yet.
Oh, thank you. Right. I'm gonna pause. Is there anyone else wants to get in the queue? Happy to keep going. Okay, then next is just a quick comment for me on the Youth Advisory Commission report. Yeah, I thank you, Mr. Chadwick and Internal Audit, for going through all of that history. I will encourage the body to accept the report, but I think as assembly members and members of the administration know, I have been actively talking about the Youth Advisory Commission and actively seeing if we can get folks on the commission. And I think, one of the things that's really helpful for the Youth Advisory Commission is if we have consistent staff. From my experience in the last administration, the staff that for the Youth Advisory Commission was not consistent. There was one person and then another person, and then I don't know if at the end of the administration, if there was actually anyone that was actually staffing that commission. So I guess question to the administration, sort of what is the plan to provide consistent staff for that particular commission?
Don't know, but I can find out.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to comment that I appreciated that you raised the issue at the joint meeting with the school district, and that it seems like there's definitely opportunity to benefit from what they're doing, or some synergy. And yeah, I'm eager to hear what comes about from those conversations.
Yeah, thank you. So for members of the administration who weren't at that joint school board assembly meeting, the school district and the school board did agree to disseminate the Youth Advisory Commission and the Youth Assembly representative positions to the various student bodies in the high school. So that is something that should be happening soon, and hopefully that will get some more applications for both the commission and the Youth Assembly representative. But yeah, beyond that, there are ways that we can synergize and collaborate more effectively, perhaps even if the school district has capacity to provide some staffing support, those kinds of things, to alleviate the municipality, since youth is really their expertise, right? That would be great.
Thank you.
Okay, so then the next one, I guess I'll pause. Any other questions from committee members? Okay, so then the next one I had was on the ADA Commission. So, yeah, I appreciate Mr. Chadwick from Internal Audit, your take on the ADA Commission. I'm wondering if, and I see the HR director is here. I'm wondering if the HR director could comment on whether ADA is something that's still needed, the commission, is still needed, or if the ADA coordinator is really fulfilling that role. And also, the move of the commission to HR was something that was expressed in the internal audit report. And so if you have a comment on that as well.
Thank you, Assembly Member Rivera. For the record, Nikki Chewbacca, HR Director for the municipality. I really appreciate the report that Mr. Chadwick put together. Is very thorough and very balanced. I think this is obviously a very important issue. We want to make sure that we are taking care of and respectful of the employees we have who have disabilities. I believe that I have one of our staff members here, Paul, who is working part-time on this issue as part of his job. In other words, he's full-time, but this is part of his job. He's doing an excellent job at it. I think that I concur with Mr. Chadwick's view that if the commission is going to continue, we would need to rethink what its role is so that there's not, overlap, that whatever Paul's doing complements whatever the commission itself is doing. That said, we'd also really have to think seriously, about whether even if we appointed folks, whether people would actually do the work, right? Because we've had almost 2 years where they haven't. So I would say that I think that HR can continue to do the work and make sure that the mission, at least as it is currently stated in code, is effectuated through the work that our staff are doing. So I don't know if Mr. Deary has anything that he want to add to that, if you want to speak to that, but we're looking forward to working with the Assembly on this particular issue too, because it's important.
Great. Yeah, I guess before I ask if you have anything further, just reading through the audit report and just looking at the code provision that talks about the expectations of the commission. The ADA commission, if you read that, it sort of looks like a job description itself, right? So, if that needs to be reworked, I think that would be of benefit to put forward an ordinance that would change the scope of that commission if we feel like that commission still needs to exist. I am all for efficiencies and cutting commissions if it makes sense. I'm not opposed to that. But Mr. Deary, did you want to add anything?
I don't think there's anything additional to add. As the HR director said, that I could do all of that work, both with the public and employees as well. I provide advice and provide site visits and accessibility surveys, that kind of stuff. Make sure that I can try and put an ADA slant on a lot of the work that goes on in the municipality, to make sure that all of the citizens in the municipality are included.
Great. Ms. Lawrence?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, when I was reading section 3 there, the purpose and goal of the commission, I was surprised, like number 7, carry out educational and public relations programs designed to create public awareness. That's a pretty big ask. And I guess I had assumed too that a big part of it, at least generally, look to commissions to provide feedback and identify like what's working, what's not working, or like we do with the budget advisory commission on specific things. So I don't know if if that purpose is so daunting as to not encourage people to apply, and definitely it seems like there's overlap. I guess the piece that I'd be interested in keeping would be that feedback. Not that citizens can't provide feedback in other ways, but if there's a dedicated avenue, and maybe that fits, as you mentioned, in another commission. But I agree, that's quite a job description.
Any other thoughts from committee members? So I will say, normally this committee does not provide recommendations to the full assembly, unless it's the annual audit report, in which case we do. But if there is on any of these reports a recommendation that folks want to make, I'd be glad to have that deliberation here and we can make that to the full assembly. Any other thoughts on this particular topic, the ADA commission?
May I offer something?
Yes, go ahead.
I really appreciated what Charles Franz just mentioned about consolidation. I think that's a brilliant idea. That if there are committees that are being sunsetted, thinking about whether there are pieces that have a common theme, like for example, Youth Advisory Commission. I'm sure there are a lot of youth out there with disabilities. Can we incorporate some of what the ADA this commission would do in what they're doing? And are there other commissions who could do some of this work as well? And with all of them, collectively, these more active commissions achieve the purpose that this particular commission otherwise would have achieved. It might be another. So I thought that was a really good idea. We have to work with you all on that if that's something that you're interested in.
Thanks. Any other thoughts? So one of the things that I want to make sure we don't do is, well, I guess if we don't take any action, then the commission will automatically sunset. Is that accurate?
Well, I'm not an attorney, Mr. Chair, but I believe that's the case, that unless the phrase is unless affirmatively reauthorized by the assembly.
Okay. So then I'm not an attorney either, but I will say that sounds fairly accurate. Okay, so then the decision is either the assembly decides to reauthorize it, and I guess there's an ordinance in the works already to reauthorize certain boards and commissions. Is this one on that list?
I gather through the chair, that is put together by Mr. Gates. I believe they're all on there right now,
Okay,
and so I think you'd have to.
so we would have to proactively take it off the list. Okay, got it, thank you. So then I guess the decision is, do we want to make any kind of recommendation now, or do we just want to leave that to the full assembly when we get that ordinance before us? Yeah.
I would just like to say that the administration is working to fill the Youth Advisory Commission. So that's an indication that they're, supportive of keeping it going. I don't know about some of these other commissions. I know she's working on a whole board of them. So my expectation would be the administration would be supportive of at least that one that was recommended to sunset to continue on. But I think the administration would be perfectly comfortable not making a recommendation and just letting the assembly, make a decision.
Okay, all right. Okay, so then, sorry, I have a few more. All right, so seeing no one else in the queue, next one is the HHS Commission. So first is HHS is an old moniker, so I'm wondering when the ordinance is put together, if we could change the name of the commission so that it fits with the current moniker, which is the Anchorage Health Department. And then second is there was a request in a former audit, and you had it in here, sorry, I have to pull it up, to remove a provision to require a annual plan, I believe. Remove a provision to deletion of the requirement to recommend to the mayor and assembly a health and human services plan. Do you know if the assembly actually took action on that?
I don't, through the chair, I don't think the assembly did.
Okay. So this is one of those things where, if it makes sense for us to do it, then I'd like us to actually see if we can get it done. So are there any thoughts on the committee on that particular provision of removing in the composition powers and duties for this particular commission, the requirement to have that annual plan?
What page, Mr. Chair?
So I am looking at the audit. This is on page 2 of the audit, 2 of 9. And it's probably elsewhere in the audit, but that final paragraph where it talks about the
Oh.
Moreover, the Municipal Health and Human Services Commission did not recommend to the Mayor and Assembly a Health and Human Services plan as required by municipal code. However, the commission did do a resolution, 2020-05, so last year, to recommend to the Assembly that we remove that particular part in code. I myself don't remember seeing that resolution, but who knows? Yeah, go ahead.
Through the chair, I think that might still be illegal.
Oh, so there is an ordinance in the works, it's just in the
I
legal
think it's in
department.
works. I think it might be illegal still.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, then if that's the case, then I'll go ahead and just move on. But hopefully we can go ahead and hopefully legal will get something to us soon on that.
And Mr. Chair,
Yeah, go ahead, Mr.
if I just may comment on that, just, that seems to be another big thing. That's a lot to ask of a commission, which I think is why you brought it up. So I'm also looking forward to seeing what legal says.
Great. Okay, thank you. All right, so then not seeing anyone else in the queue. Next one I had a question on was the MAC, the Municipal Airports Aviation Advisory Commission, if that's the correct acronym there. So the audit talked about a specific request that might be helpful, which was to remind the commission about the duties of the commission. And I think, Mr. Chadwick, could you speak to why you put that in the report?
Yes, one of the duties of the commission is to look at their operating budget for Merrill Airfield. And we found that we could not find in the commission's meeting minutes any discussion regarding Merrill's airport's operating budget other than discussions regarding COVID-19 aid from the coronavirus aid. And so we felt that, this was something that was specifically mentioned that they ought to be doing, and we just couldn't find them doing that. We thought that maybe we should be reminded that this is one of their important duties and responsibilities.
Are there any thoughts on how we might be able to send that message on to the commission?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would be happy to send Mr. Gibbs just an email and ask him at the next commission meeting, just to kind of go through what they're supposed to be doing and get feedback from them on how we can assist them in doing that. That'd be just an easy fix, I think.
Great, that would be wonderful. Thank you, Ms. Dabowski. All right, any other thoughts before we move on? Yeah, Ms. Prince.
Mr. Chair, I'm just thinking about how do you institutionalize it so it doesn't get forgotten, and not that you would, but down the road, and it's almost like it ought to be flagged at some level in the budget process, and I don't know what that would look like, if it would be on the assembly side with just the budget work sessions, I don't know, but just putting that out there, that I would be interested in other ways too, and appreciate Ms. Dabowski's offer to take that forward.
Yeah, just opining on that, I guess, a little bit. We usually expect certain boards and commissions to provide resolutions based on the budget. I know the Public Transportation Advisory Board does that almost every year. The Budget Advisory Commission will provide that. So I would suspect that the Budget and Finance Committee would likely be the best home for making sure if we are expected to get certain reports on the budget or sort of resolutions on the budget, that it goes through that committee.
And just to follow up, maybe I can follow up with the chair of that committee and maybe also our budget analyst to see if there's some way we can flag it too in our processes.
Great,
We're gonna do that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
thank you. All right, any other thoughts before I move on? Okay, last one, on my list. So, Mr. Chadwick, could you just opine a little bit on the sort of the utility of these sunset audits? How much time every year you spend on these? Do you usually have 10 a year? Do you have more than that?
Through the chair, these audits come up in a 3-year cycle. So during this cycle, there were 10. 3 years from now, there'll actually be 11 because of that, I forget the exact name, but that homelessness commission that recently passed. Next year, there'll be 7 or 8. And the following year, there'll be 2 or 3. That's the year we like. These take quite a bit of time. We start in about mid-June and go through about the second week of August working on these. They're not difficult to do. It's more of an information gathering exercise in a lot of ways. But it just takes a while to gather that information from various parties. So that while they're not difficult, this does take at least one staff person from about mid-June to the beginning of August to go through all these reports. When we first started doing these audits in 2011, there were a number of boards and commissions that were sunsetted. I don't recall which ones they were, but over the years, as we've gone through these, we've kind of filtered through the ones that needed to be sunsetted, so to speak. And now we're kind of left with those that are, I don't know, lack of a better word, the good ones or the ones that don't need to be sunsetted. So the exercise now basically involves, are they fully staffed? Are they doing what they're supposed to be doing? I do think that there is some utility in looking at some of these boards and commissions that have had problems in the past. For example, we looked at the Public Safety Advisory Board a number of years ago, and we found that, I think it was around 2016 or so, 15, that basically they were doing a bunch of ride-alongs, and they weren't doing much else. So the assembly met with them and refocused them.
Pretty sure it was Mr. Muskie that
Yeah.
met with them.
I do have that effect. I wasn't the only commission I met with.
So they do take some time to do. We wish they were more evenly spread throughout the year or throughout that 3-year cycle, but nonetheless, that's just how it goes. Did I answer your question?
You did, yeah, thank you. And for my part, I do find utility in them, even if it's just sort of little bits and pieces from each of the audits. I'm just, always making sure and treasuring your time, because we put a lot on your plate. The annual audit plan is pretty extensive. So if there's any way we can find efficiencies and make sure that you're able to get to all of the different audits we put on your plate, that's helpful. Any other thoughts before we move on?
I would just add, I wish I had a quarter for every time someone said, let's do an audit of this. I mean, because your work is so valuable. And I know every time I read an audit, I learn something about the processes and how things work. And so thanks for the work you and your team do.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no one else in the queue, then we're gonna go ahead and move on to our second item under new business, discussion on short-term rentals. So this is an item that Mr. Weddleton raised for this issue for this committee to consider as it came up in Girdwood. And particularly this deals with rental listings versus what we collect in revenue. And actually, Mr. Moore talked a little bit about that revenue piece at the prior committee meeting. So I'm wondering, Mr. Weddleton, if you can just sort of lay a little bit of the foundation, and then I'll turn it over to Treasury and then Audit to see if they have anything to add.
Well, sure, and actually I'd invite Mike Edgington, since I heard that he was on the line, to maybe provide much better color to it than I would. But the big picture is we tax, through, the rental companies like Airbnb and so on, and we have agreements with them to pay. But in some discussions that Girdwood people have had, and I've sat in on it with some companies that check those things for other cities, that what we're doing only captures potentially a small part of the kind of non-hotel rentals. And these companies do audits. And so really looking for maybe Mike can coordinate an audit with them or figure out how they do it. My sense is for not a lot of money that they actually do the audits. And then ultimately what they want to do is provide the service where they will go out and, create enforcement and gather information regarding how much people might owe on taxes. So that's kind of his request. Can we do that? Particularly in Girdwood, the short-term rental market is significant for many reasons because it hurts their workforce housing long-term, and but also could be a revenue issue for the city and kind of a fairness with everyone else who's paying for, rental taxes. So that's basically, I think Mike could probably fill in a little bit of detail if you have time.
Thanks, Mr. Wellington. And I just want to note before I go on to you, Mr. Edgington, that Ms. LaFrance was right. That's another nickel or a quarter or whatever that you should put in your bucket. Go ahead, Mr. Edgington.
Thank you. Mike Edgington, co-chair of Girdwood Board of Supervisors here. Yes, there was actually an audit, a short audit done by the municipality. They had a contract with a company called Host Compliance January in 2020. And in fact, that's the only source of reliable data we have at all on the short-term rental market here in Girdwood. If I recall correctly, I said it was a relatively short-run contract for a month or two before the COVID pandemic, and I believe they counted to approximately 250 properties that were involved in short-term rental in Girdwood. We have about 1,400 housing units in total, so it's approximately 20% of our housing units are involved in the short-term rental market. Although a reasonable amount of information was provided to the municipality, the only information we got locally was an approximate count, although it was refined slightly later. As I said, that's the only source of reliable data we've had on this topic at all. And I think both in terms of understanding the impact, setting planning goals, because we are currently involved in the middle of our, hopefully just beyond the middle of developing rewriting the comprehensive plan for Girdwood. So it's important to get this data for long-term planning. It's important to get the data in terms of potentially putting together policy for some kind of regulation, or at least monitoring the short-term rental market here. So I would very much encourage this to be done. The other thing that would be very useful is if it was more than just one point in time. We have a lot of seasonality here in Girdwood. And it's not at all clear that, we know, I should say, at least from a large number of anecdotes, that properties which are available in the short-term rental market in the summer are often not available in the winter, and to some extent vice versa. So a single sampling at one point in time doesn't give us anything close to the whole picture. Generally, I think other people will probably talk to the cost benefit of doing these types of analyses, but I know definitely from the sales side from these companies, they point to the relatively low cost and the relatively large gains. Even if you just capture a few properties, it generally pays for an audit of the whole community. My basic plea is this is a great way to actually get a better picture of a very important part of the market locally, of the housing market locally, and it would be extremely valuable for us as a community.
Great, thank you, Mr. Edgington. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Moore if you want to just talk a little bit about how Treasury deals with this issue.
Okay, sure. So I'll correct a number of things that I just heard from the contract we had with.
Wait for me.
If we can make sure if you're not speaking that you're on mute, please. Thanks.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, this is Dan Moore from Treasury, and Paula Ricewood is here also. The contract that we had with Host Compliance, which later was bought out by Granicus, was done for not 1 or 2 months. It was actually 15 months. And we started in November of 2019, and we were very, very heavy into it by, I'd say, February of 2020, and then COVID happened. So we went on pause for probably about 6 months. We didn't think it was right to be pursuing this in the midst of COVID. We came back to it in the fall of 2020, and we finished it up by early 2021. We did an exhaustive review of the Girdwood community with the help of Granicus and the information they provided, but also actually much, much more with our own effort. So we did online survey, paper survey, tons of phone calls, all sorts of audit type procedures. We did collect back taxes on a number of properties. But what we found, and this is what's really important, is we found from all the information gathered that we had 95% of them covered. They were already registered with us. What is not clear in just looking at number of properties is there's a tremendous number of properties that fall under the umbrella of various hosting platforms, Airbnb, VRBO, which also known as Home Away, Vacasa, major player in that market, several other major property management companies. So we absolutely squeezed out as much as we possibly could from Girdwood in terms of finding who's there, making sure they're registered, collecting back taxes. We have high confidence that we have that market covered in terms of short-term rental. We don't know what long-term rental is, but from the code definition, if it's 29 days or less, that's considered short-term rental. So we do not see any major loss of revenue that is occurring in Girdwood. When we look at room tax, it's an area-wide tax. And when we do our enforcement, it's based on where do we see the highest risk of loss all around the city, not just in one geographic area. For Girdwood, we knew there was a high concentration of short-term rentals. We became aware of that. So we thought it was worthwhile for us to do a one-time project to really give a lot of focus on Girdwood, and that's what we did. And we used Granicus, we used tremendous resources in Treasury. We absolutely cannot continue that. What I've seen in some, and we've talked to Mr. Edgington in Girdwood, it seems to me that a lot of the data that they want does not relate to the room tax and the revenue. It actually relates to the use of the property. So it's like how many people are in a particular unit at one time? How is the parking? Is it overflowing? How is it disrupting the neighborhood? Those are land use regulation issues that have nothing to do with Treasury. Treasury is only focused on the actual room transaction and whether or not there's any major leakage or shortage of money going on there. And after all the work we did, we feel very confident that we are getting the vast majority of money that we should be getting for short-term rentals in Girdwood. And so that's kind of how we ended up our project. We did inform Granicus in late 2020 that we were going to not extend. We also, I think Mr. Edgington reached out to us in May, and we also said we are not going to extend, and we explained our reason why. And so from our position in terms of cost benefit, use of people, use of budget money, we have so many other priorities to cover in Treasury that we do not see this as an ongoing type project. It was a special project, it was worthwhile, but we don't expect any additional major gains to revisit it. So that's kind of where we stand.
Great, thank you. And then, Mr. Weddleton, correct me if I'm wrong, but your interest in bringing this up was not just specifically Girdwood, is that correct?
Well, Girdwood is the catalyst of it, and partly because they're looking carefully at, maybe regulating short-term rentals because of the kind of land use issues that Dan mentioned. And Dan, I appreciate that broad spectrum. I think that's very helpful. And I have a couple of questions on that, but my main issue was Girdwood, but certainly the rest of the city as well. But I mean, I think Dan's point's pretty good, but it kind of leaves us, how do we get the information? Is the information out there for the number of people at these different places and how long they're there and so on? Kind of those land use issues that Dan mentioned. Is there a way to get the information on that?
Thanks. I don't know. I don't think that necessarily would fall under your
So,
department.
Dan, let me-
More
Dan,
Go
or-
ahead, Travis.
Assemblymember Welton, through the chair, this is Travis Frist, CFO. These are questions that would probably pertain to the real estate services group to be able to be answered in accordance. That's not in our preview of what we do in the finance department. As Dan said, we're predominantly the bean counters and make sure you pay what you owe for what we assume that you have used. So that's not in our purview, and I would refer you on to the real estate services group.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I mean, it's certainly clear distinction. I guess my curiosity is that is that information collected by, Granicus when they do their work and may be available, or is that something they don't even collect and there's just no way to get it through them?
This is Dan Moore. I'm not sure exactly how deep and how confirmed the information is that Granicus can gather. I know they do sell various levels of service, and that is sort of one of them. But that's not something we explored because it just didn't tie into what Treasury does. I will say,
Right.
I did hear, and it's just one other comment, Mr. Chair. I did see some prior discussion about what Granicus does and how the city could be losing money and all that. And one of the things that I read in this past conversation was there was an assumption that people like on Airbnb can opt out of collecting the tax, and they can just say, oh, don't worry about Airbnb. I'll go ahead and do my transaction. I'll make sure I collect the tax and give it to the city. Well, we don't trust in that at all, 0%. And that particular concept is very, very dated. That dates back 4 or 5 years ago when we had an Airbnb voluntary contract with them, like other jurisdictions. At that time, Airbnb actually wanted to add a clause that says we're going to allow hosting entities to opt out of collecting tax. And we said absolutely not. And what we did is we did not renew that voluntary contract, and we went to the assembly and we put it into municipal code. And by law, Airbnb and VRBO must collect tax on every single transaction that they handle, okay? And I looked at their website just the other day, and it's all out there about how they collect. When they have a registered jurisdiction, they will collect all of the tax. And we're one of them, we're listed here, okay? So I am very confident that Airbnb and VRBO are collecting everything. And I said it earlier in the previous work session, the numbers coming in from those entities are huge. I mean, astronomical. So I'm not concerned that we're losing a bunch of money from that. And they're also become bigger and bigger players since the time of COVID, because people, I think, get more comfort or more convenience in using those platforms than they do going to a standard hotel or somebody that they don't know or is not regulated in any way at all, right? So I think I think the market it keeps evolving, but I think it's evolved to an even better and better situation from Treasury standpoint when it comes to collecting the revenue. So.
Thank you. Mr. Chadwick, did you want to add anything in terms of internal audit, your history on this particular topic, and then sort of any thoughts or ideas that you have to get to the crux of what Mr. Edrington is asking for?
Through the chair, we have never specifically performed an audit of this that I recall. However, I did talk with Mr. Moore and some of his staff, about a month and a half ago. And basically the staff, Mr. Moore was out at the time, had said the same thing that he's saying now, that they're very confident in that the value added by doing an additional contract with Granicus was very little. Now, in terms of getting this other information, it might be worth exploring the various levels of service that Granicus offers, and have that go through perhaps land use, real estate department, who could initiate something like that if that was an interest to everybody. Generally speaking, internal audit doesn't normally conduct surveys. to gather that type of information, we would audit the survey to see if it was done properly, but we don't typically conduct those types of surveys. So I think your best bet might be contacting the real estate department and asking to get some of their input. I don't know, they might have some of this information already. Possibly.
Thank you. All right, so I'll go back to Mr. Edgington if you wanted to add anything based on the responses that we've gotten so far.
Yes, thank you very much, Mike Edgington here. I really appreciate Mr. Moore's answer. I did have a communication in March last year asking what the outcome of the work had been done, and was told there were approximately 250 properties in Girdwood. I asked again in May this year, and all I was told is the contract is finished. I was given no more information at all. It's news to me that it went on for 15 months. I said, I've just seen one single number and been told that no more information can be provided. So I would be very interested in what information was captured and what can be shared with the community, because we have plenty of work we're trying to do, and we just cannot get to this data in any other way. So if the municipality has spent the time and the significant effort capturing it, it will be very valuable to share that information. But I think if this, based on Mr. Moore's comments and analysis, it does sound like the treasury component of this was very well covered, and I agree with him from that perspective. I think there is definitely more things that can be done in the land use area. And whether we go ahead and try and put a policy in place when some of this data is available, we don't have access to it, or whether we can do a better policy if we have access and do some further analysis. I think, well, I obviously have an opinion on that by the way I phrased the question. So yeah, basically, since the treasury component is complete, I think we would be looking either for some other type of analysis to be done, or at the very, very minimum, sharing the work that's been done so far from the treasury, rather than just that initial number I got, which itself was only approximate back in March last year.
Great, thanks. I guess, Mr. Moore, is that something that can be shared with the Girdwood Board of Supervisors?
This is Dan Moore. My guess is, and this is an educated guess, is that we're probably quite limited in what we can share. And the reason being because municipal code says, this is for room tax, that information that we gather about businesses is to be held confidential. And it only lists particular individuals within the city that can receive that information. The other thing is, besides the confidentiality aspect, which is very important, is also any information that a company like Granicus gathers is as good and helpful as it is at that point in time. So if this was primarily gathered 15 months ago, 16 months ago, it's really not going to, especially with COVID and the way people have changed all sorts of things, I don't see where that would be very helpful, even if we could release it. I do think, though, that what Mike Chadwick said is, if there were a way to, explore with Granicus the land use type issues with some, either the Girdwood Board of Supervisors or some particular municipal department being kind of an executor or a sponsor of a new form of contract, then I think it might be worthwhile to explore. But it just, I just don't know what the avenue is for doing that. We did it based on our focus on the revenues, and we did it expecting that this was going to be a special project. And it was worthwhile, but like the value add, like going forward, we just don't see the value add going forward for us. So.
Thank you. Before I go to Mr. Weddleton for a final thought on this, anyone else in the queue on this? Go ahead, Ms. Krantz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Moore, for the information. And I guess just procedurally, I just would ask, what would be the next step from here?
I was going to ask Mr. Weddleton that.
Okay. That's fair.
Okay. All right. So you got a preview what I was going to ask you, Mr. Weddleton. So do you have the information that you need to move forward on this topic?
Well, I think next step would go to Granicus and say, do they have more of the, occupancy type information? And then also from Mr. Moore, I understand the data, the security stuff, but even if you have, if there's on the order of a couple hundred people doing short-term rentals in Girdwood, if you could just give us, do you have the monthly totals or something? You don't have to even do dollar amount, just say this number of places we're doing it, and then we'd have an ebb and flow during the course of the year. And that's important when, as they're looking at possibly restricting short-term rentals, when would you do it? How would you do it? All the different parameters from that number alone would be valuable. And it seems like that would not be proprietary at all. It's 175 one month, 250 another, whatever it might be. I guess that's a question for Dan. What do you think?
This is Dan Moore. When we did our project, we focused a lot on the initial snapshot information. So we didn't get to look at how things changed over time. And then with COVID, things came to a standstill, in the market. So we don't really, with the information that we received, it was really working off an initial snapshot and sort of working it to death, so to speak, right? So I don't think the information we have would provide any good trend type information. We don't track in the way we collect room tax, we don't track anything based on geography. So we can't really tell you how much revenue was generated in Girdwood versus some other part of the municipality. One thing that's particularly unique about Girdwood is they also have the Alyeska Resort Hotel. And so if we were to somehow, figure out a way by zip code, okay, give us all the revenues generated in the Girdwood zip code area, that would actually be a breach of confidentiality because that resort hotel is so large, it would give you a very strong indication of how much business they do. So we have that also as another consideration. So.
Yeah, no, I understand on the revenue side. I was looking more for counts, and yeah, I understand. Challenging, and certainly COVID created many disruptions. So, okay, well, I think sometimes you charge forward with far less information than you'd like to have. So I think as Girdwood goes forward on this, that's just where they are. And then a further conversation with Granicus and other companies that might gather information, see if they have some way to get the information for Girdwood. So that's where we will continue.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Thank you, Mr. Edgington. Thank you, Mr. Moore. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. Oh, Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I just ask, who is going to have the conversation with Granicus?
So, Mr. Weddleton, Ms. LaFrance is asking, are you going to have the conversation with Granicus or someone else?
I've in many ways tagged along with the expertise from the Girdwood folks, and I expect that they will be setting that stuff up and
Got it.
and kindly invite me to sit in.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, so we just have a couple minutes left. So under other business, I just have two quick items. First is, so as I stated at the last assembly meeting, at some point in the near future, we will be getting the annual financial report. What I'll likely do is probably give it a couple of weeks after we receive it. I will schedule a municipal audit committee meeting for us to review that report, just like we would do normally every year. And then second thing is likely that meeting to review the annual financial report and any future meetings of this committee will be on Teams until the situation with the pandemic settles down. So get used to that different modality for this committee. And then that is it. Is there any other unfinished business before I move on to audience participation? Yes, Mr. Chadwick.
I have one item of maybe other business. Just a minor item. Change in the way we do things, suggested change. As you know, we distribute hard copies of the audit reports to the assembly members on a blue cover. And we were thinking of, instead of distributing a hard copy, to just send a PDF to the clerk's office and have them distribute that. I don't know if people like the hard copy and they'll say, where's my hard copy? Or is it just fine just to go ahead and change our process a little bit, maybe save a little bit of money, and then just do that? Is that acceptable, or is that?
I'll give you my perspective and then I'll let other committee members chime in. Totally fine with me. I haven't even looked at this because I have everything on here. So I think the less paper we use, the better. I think obviously we'll still need copies for the public.
Sure.
But I think for committee members, I'm fine going paperless. If other committee members are okay with that.
Same with me. I need to print it out, I can.
Okay, I think we'll just scan that blue one and send it to the clerk's office, have them distribute it to the seven members instead of putting a hard copy in your mailbox. We'll do that from now on.
Great.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, not hearing anything else, we'll go ahead and move on to audience participation. Welcome.
My name is Eugene Callahan. I represent myself. I follow the public process. When the public process done appropriately, a decision made by the governing body is more likely to public interest. I'll open with the last comment, which I know it's time to bring it up. Where's the hard copy in this room? Assembly members mentioned in this room that they have a copy, but there's no public that has a copy. All it says on the agenda references internal audit 2021, sunset audit 1 through 10. Has no clear defined what is being audited. You would think even on the agenda, you would have a list of all those audits on the agenda so we could have a chance to see. On the website, I see you can click in, but the fact is, respectfully, Senator Rivera, you didn't have a chance to look at it. I had not a chance to really have a chance to look at it because a lot of times, last minute, the stuff is posted on the website just before the meeting starts or during the meeting starts. So you're talking about audits. And you're also talking about, strikingly, is one particular audit that I have a personal concern about is the Americans with Disabilities Act Advisory Commission, where you're talking about to not continue that operation. That's what's being recommended. Why? Because of dealing with, did they have staff, meetings, and so forth? Well, those are the arguments you could use with how the boards and commissions have been operating with deficiencies. These are deficiencies, but should cause for reason to end the program. And I remind you, the American Disabilities Commission, American Disabilities Act is a civil rights law. There's a reason for it. And I see non-compliance in the municipality of Anchorage. In this very room, there's not complete compliance with that. That's why it's even more valuable. And even at the main Lusec Library, there's no compliance. And I was in a major lawsuit that dealt with the American Disability Act and charged the state in the LIO and the Valley and with violations of the American Disability Act. There's a need for this, there's a need for that commission, and there's a rational reason to say, okay, we don't see what we need, therefore there's a reason for it to end. But that's not a reason for it to end, that's a reason to show cause that there needs to be more care and responsibility among the administration, the assembly, the city, to give the necessary steps to these parties so they can operate and they can provide guidance and advice on those items and not to end those programs. And note for the record, I have attended those meetings some time back. They didn't have a quorum. And yes, COVID is an issue, but one particular member of the chair was a key that was involved with me dealing with that lawsuit as a witness, and he was not able to bring in part of that case dealing with the ADA because they didn't feel it was part of the case. That's the end. I will say time's up. Wish you all the best, and please get these meetings over to the Lusec Library.
Thank you. All right, seeing no other members of the public, thank you, everyone. This meeting is adjourned.